Hi, I'm Sheryl, and we're at Facebook, which is probably not that surprising, but we're excited to have everyone for Facebook Live, and I'm excited to welcome Adam Grant. Adam is the highest-rated professor at Wharton. He studies how people find motivation and meaning in their lives. He is my dear friend and the co-author of Option B, our new book out on resilience. Excited to have you here. And I guess it's not that surprising to have Moira Burke at Facebook since she works here. But she's a research scientist at Facebook. She has her PhD in human-computer interaction from Carnegie Mellon. She studies the relationship between technology and social support. She's published many papers on well-being and computer-mediated communication. And her work at Facebook's been really important. She's influenced our privacy controls in our groups. And we are here today because Moira just published a paper, which is a study on what happens in social networks when someone passes away, which is obviously very near and dear to my heart personally and to Adam's heart as we've been working on and writing and now talking about Option B. Partnered with researchers at UC San Diego for this study to help understand what happens to social networks when someone dies. So this is the first study, at least I've seen, of this kind. Why did you do it, and what did you find? And how did you do it?
Yeah, sure. So my co-author, Will Hobbs from UC San Diego, and I wanted to know what happens to a network of friends when someone they care about dies. And so what we found was that it's not just that individuals can be resilient after a death, but that whole networks of friends can be resilient. They started to interact with each other more after their friend died, and that increase in interactions actually lasted for many years down the line.
And that is completely consistent with my personal experience. My sister was telling me the other days when I lost Dave, the people I was close to, like Adam and my closest friends, got way closer. And I didn't really think they could. But they are also friends with each other. So Monday was the anniversary of Dave's death, unfortunately, and those same people weren't just with me, but are with each other. And some people who weren't even really friendly are now quite close.
That was one of the things I was really curious about when I read the study, which is amazing. So is it people who already are close to each other now communicating more and supporting each other? Is it people who didn't even realize they shared a friend in common, connecting? Is it both?
It's actually both. So we studied the close friends of a person who died, but it doesn't mean that they all knew each other. Sometimes those friends come from different pockets of a person's life. And so they were able to use Facebook to find each other and spread the news of the person's death, pay tribute to their friend, and really, for several years down the line, create a space to grieve together.
So it didn't happen on Facebook, but this reminds me of something that happened in my home, which is a close friend of mine got divorced after many years. And trying to turn it into something positive, she one day said, well, maybe I should celebrate. And I said, well, throw the celebrate. If you want to celebrate, we're here to celebrate with you. So we had a kind of celebratory dinner for her. And her friends from all parts of her life came in for that dinner. And now I know them. And I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And it was a little, you wouldn't expect that coming out of a divorce, which is, often a very traumatic event. But it was something that put me in touch with her friends. So on Facebook, are people communicating more like something happens to Adam, you and I are friends, and I'm communicating with you because I'm worried, or because we come together for a funeral, or?
We think that it's often people are grieving together. What we found was that it's the close friends of a person who died start to talk with each other in the month right after the death about 30% more than they talked with each other before their friend died. So they're sharing stories of the person, and they're commenting on each other's stories and sharing photos. And what we see is that that's kind of a big spike in communication between people who might not have known each other before. But what we see is that 2 years down the line, they're still talking to each other about 3% more than they did before their friend died.
And very important to us at Facebook that we take privacy very seriously. How do you do this kind of research, protecting the privacy of the people involved?
Absolutely. So for this kind of research, we worked with a large number of Facebook activities, but it was all with anonymized data. And so we studied counts of interactions between people. So in this particular study, we counted how often two people commented on each other's posts, how often they posted on each other's timelines, and how often they were both tagged in the same photo.
Without looking at any of the content, just
Exactly.
the numbers of the
just
interactions.
counted things. Yeah, and we looked across many people up at a month at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting, Moira, because when I first started thinking about this, the intuition is like, oh, people are there to comfort each other, right? They've gone through a common loss, and they want to be there for each other. But if they're showing up in the same photos, it actually suggests that they've become closer.
Yeah.
And they've built personal connections that might not have been there before or are stronger now. Do you have a sense of when that shift happens? Is it in the first few months that it's mostly sort of grief and support focused, and then it becomes a relationship over time, or how that plays out?
It's hard to tell for any individual person since everybody's experience is very different, but we do see this immediate burst in communication in the short term where they are going through acute grieving, but it looks like a resilient response because they are supporting each other pretty quickly within a few months. Yeah.
It's interesting. How would you define a resilient response?
Well, I think you've talked about this as well, Adam, that resilience is this ability to be stable and functioning even after you've gone through a trauma. And in this case, what we found was we counted how often these networks of friends talked to each other before the death, including that person who eventually died. And we found that in the 2 years after the death, they had just as many interactions, even though there was one fewer person there. And so it's as if there was a hole that was left there from the person who died, but that those friends came together and supported each other in order to try to fill that hole.
Wow.
One of the things that seems so interesting in terms of how people fill that hole is they often pick up activities that remind them of the person they lost. I remember, Sheryl, you started doing that with your brother-in-law, Rob.
I always played Scrabble with Dave.
Oh, yeah.
It was a thing we did all the time, and we didn't really play online or on our phones. We just played in person. And he played constant games of mobile Scrabble with his brother. And now Rob and I play. And it's terrible for Rob because Dave was pretty good and Rob's pretty good. And I literally think in the 2 years, or maybe we started 6 months in, I don't remember, Rob and I have played hundreds and hundreds of games, and I'm pretty sure I've won like 3. And he was probably sleeping those days. So it is not a good game for Rob. I'm getting better, but I'm not as good. But Rob's profile picture is still him and Dave. And so every time I play, I see Rob and I see Dave. And I think even without that, I feel connected to Rob. And there was a hole in each other's lives. We certainly can't fill that hole in many ways, but in this one tiny little thing, but it's a daily thing. It really matters. And that's one thing I learned working on Option B was sometimes we want the big stuff to get fixed, and the big stuff can't get fixed. I can't get Dave back. But these little moments we can have of joy or remembrance matter, and they fill just a tiny bit.
And that's your Scrabble story is exactly the kind of thing that we found in this study, that you and Rob started to play Scrabble with each other. In our study, we found that friends of the person who died started to interact in new ways, even lightweight ways like playing Scrabble. And really, it's these everyday lightweight ways where you're sharing support with that person and remembering the person who died.
So I'll ask you each one last question, and I'll go to Adam and then Moira. So if you're thinking about how to support friends through crises, to create that friend resilience, that community resilience that we all believe in so much. One piece of advice for anyone watching.
I think one of the best things you can do is share stories. Those memories, people are afraid to talk about them a lot because they don't want to sort of trigger any sadness. But the reality is, like, people love to reminisce about the people they've lost. And Sheryl, you know this from your experience. And so often those stories are sort of different snapshots of the same qualities that they most loved or that they most miss about the friend.
And one piece of advice.
I would add to that, it's just so lovely to be able to see someone through others' eyes. And so, sharing these stories is a great way to show support.
Thank you. Thank you for the research you've done. Thank you for everything, Adam. And thank you all for being with us.